You can't be walking around, your nails are... Hey guys, and welcome back to Gabbin with Jessa. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read throughout the summer, so for June, July, and August. So this is part of my season wrap-up series. I like to just have a nice long video at the end of each season talking about all of the books that I read, and I can't believe we're already in September. It is crazy to me that that summer has gone by so quickly. I'll have my spring wrap up so you can see how well I did in the spring, and then hopefully you won't judge me as much for not doing that well in the summer. In the summer, I read 18 books, which is not very good for 3 months, at least compared to what I did back in the spring. This is mostly due to the fact that I started working again in the summer when things started opening back up. So that was really good for me. I really needed to get back to work, so I was able to be doing something else besides being stuck in my house. Of those 18 books, 9 of them were audiobooks, 1 of them was an ebook, and 8 of them were physical books. Yeah, let's just jump right into it, starting with June. And for June, I first kicked off the month with finishing Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, and I read it physically. I mean, Twilight is Twilight. I was just doing this for future videos that I am coming up with, but I just wanted to start off with it in the summertime. It was what I was reading on a little bit of a road trip, and it was what I needed to just, I don't know, it made me happy. It was a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be, or that I expected it to be, because it's Twilight. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Twilight is the book about Bella Swan, who has recently moved back in with her father in Forks, Washington, and she meets up with this family of vampires after falling in love with one of them, Edward. And the second and final book that I read in June was James Potter and the Vault of Destinies by G. Norbert Lippert. I listened to this on audiobook and gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This is the 3rd book in the James Potter series by Lippert that I have been listening to on audiobook, which follows the story of Harry Potter's firstborn son, James Potter, and his adventures throughout his schooling at Hogwarts. James and company, his friends, his family, are all sent off to the United States of America to attend the American Wizarding School with his friend Zane, because his father, Harry Potter, has been asked to keep track of this underground group that's trying to use very extreme measures to unite the Muggle and Wizarding worlds together. And even though that may sound like a great thing, it's been going about it in a way that should not be a way to inspire building trust among 2 groups of people. With these James Potter series books, I've had a fun time with them, mostly giving them 3 or 4 stars, because I don't know, I find it very interesting and I really like reading into the story, but they're just not the most enjoyable things for me. Sometimes it seems like the writing is a little spread out, it's a little scattered, there's a lot of things going on and I can't keep up with, but I still enjoy these stories from a different perspective besides J.K. Rowling's of what could have happened in the Wizarding world following the events that we see in the first 7 books. Then we are off to the month of July. Like I said, this was not very good time for reading, at least in the summertime. But I finished off July with my first book with The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. This is by the author of the same Netflix series, Marie Kondo, Tidying Up with Marie Kondo on Netflix, like I said, and it's just her life story, her growing up. I listened to this on audiobook. It was not narrated by Marie Kondo. It was narrated by somebody else whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, but it was really interesting to hear her life story and hear what inspired her to become tidy, what inspired her for her organization skills, and how she learned her own skills that she uses in her Netflix show. Then I finished Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and I read this physically. After the death of her father has kind of tainted the family name because of what happened, Spencer is determined to prove everybody wrong and prove that she is brave like she believes her father was by becoming a fighter pilot just like him. This story I was really expecting to like, I was really excited to get into, but it took me a little longer to get into it than I would have hoped for. My dad's a pilot, not like a fire pilot or anything like that, but I think that's why I was interested in the story and that's what kept me hooked instead of putting it down. And you guys know I don't really like DNFing books. When there was scenes of action, I really enjoyed those, and there were a lot spread out throughout the book, but sometimes it was just very slow for me, like I said, it was hard for me to get into, and that's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Love and War by Melissa de la Cruz. I read this physically and gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This is the second book in the Alex and Eliza trilogy. I have a full review on it that you can check out that I'll have linked. Basically, it is post-Revolutionary War, and Alex and Eliza are newlyweds, and it is just a story of their life, rebuilding America, getting into their careers, and just getting into life in this new country as new American citizens. I didn't enjoy this one as much as I did the first one because I felt it was very similar to the first book, so I thought I was just rereading it again, which I didn't really enjoy. But there were some enjoyable parts to it, and I was entertained throughout the book, so I did enjoy it enough to give it 3 out of 5 stars. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but 3 stars isn't a bad book for me. It's just a very average book for me. I had parts that I enjoyed, I had parts I disliked, but overall, it's a very enjoyable book for me. I see somewhere that sometimes people are like, oh, this book was so bad, I gave it 3 stars, and I'm like, that's not necessarily a bad review, especially out of 5. That's like average, like that you enjoyed it, but there were some things you didn't like. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. And finally, the last book I read in July was Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. I listened to this on audiobook where he is the narrator. And this is just the life of Bruce Springsteen, how he came to be, his childhood life, his life in the band. And I'm from New Jersey, and I had to listen to this book. It's like a requirement to know about the life of Bruce Springsteen if you are from New Jersey. So that is why I picked it up. Finally, we're kicking off the month of August with Calypso by David Sedaris. I was inspired to read this because of Read with Cindy. So thank you, Sydney, for this book recommendation. This is a short story collection of just the life of David Sedaris, what he's gone through in his personal life, in his touring life, everything like that. I listened to this on audiobook where he is also the narrator. I just love listening to audiobooks by the narrator when it's about their life because, I don't know, I feel like they're telling it to me personally. So I always pick up a lot of audiobooks like that, especially when I know that I'm going to be going on a long trip or I have, you know, some downtime that I know I need to kill. I love picking up celebrity audiobooks that are read by them. Also in August, I finished up New Moon by Stephanie Meyer. This is the second book in the Twilight Saga, and this, instead of focusing on Edward and his life, this actually focuses more on the life of Bella and Jacob, who was Bella's best friend growing up from childhood. I read it physically and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because, again, I've been enjoying these a lot more than I thought I would because, again, it's Twilight, and so I really wasn't expecting to like this one, but this is also because of a future video that I am excited to get to. After that, I finished The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars and I listened to it on audiobook. This is the story of 2 men who are traveling throughout the universe, and they're basically writing the book that we're reading. And I love that about this. I thought that it was so much fun. I loved that I got the version where Douglas Adams read it live, and so that was a lot of fun as well. So just hearing the audience reaction really brought me into the story more, and I loved it. I can't wait to read more by him. Then I read The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I read this one physically. Tiffy moves into a flat share where her future roommate, Leon, is on a completely opposite schedule as her, so she works during the days, he works at night, so they never actually run into each other. And so they start leaving notes for each other around the apartment, and then a friendship comes from it. And it was a very cute read. I loved reading this book. It was just so much fun. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't give it 5 out of 5 just because, I don't know, there was something missing for me there, but I really did enjoy the story. It was cute. It was longer than I expected because even though it's not a very thick book, it actually has a lot of text on the page. And so it's a good read. It's a fun read. It's heartwarming. It's very nice. After that, I read Formula for a Perfect Life by Christy Hayes. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I read this on my Kindle as an ebook. Kayla's dreams of romance and her perfect life that would come from it are completely turned upside down when she gets pregnant as a college senior from a one-night stand who also has this life planned out for him because of his parents. I got this book as an ARC and I really enjoyed it. It was something I could relate to. It was something that felt like it was written for me because it is during the time of a college senior. I have recently graduated college, and when I look for books now, a lot of them are either YA, so they take place during high school years, or they're adults, they take place when characters are in their 20s. And I talk about this in a future read that I'll have up as well. I just like reading about this new adult life when we are still, trying to be on our own and we're still trying to pretend like we're real adults, but really we're still struggling with that transition from high school and early college into finding our careers and our futures. Then I finished The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo by Amy Schumer. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is just the life of Amy Schumer. I'm not the biggest fan of Amy Schumer. I enjoyed her movies, Trainwreck and I Feel Pretty. I do enjoy those. Her comedy is a little meh for me personally, but this book, I really like this book. It was again narrated by Amy Schumer, so it was really interesting to see her perspective and her life and how she grew up and everything. And it was really inspiring too. I might have to try to rewatch some of her comedy, but I really did enjoy this book. I just love learning about celebrities from things that I've enjoyed or just that I've heard a lot about, and just learning more about them and where they've come from and finding inspiration within their texts in their life. So that's why I really enjoy them. Then another celebrity audiobook I read from somebody that I love is The Answer Is by Alex Trebek. This is, again, I listened to this on audiobook. This was narrated by Ken Jennings, but also had snippets of Alex Trebek in there. So at first it was kind of confusing because when Ken Jennings would say, I grew up in Canada, and I'm like, isn't Alex from Canada? But then I figured it out, after a few chapters, and I'm like, oh yeah, Ken Jennings is narrating it, but it's from Alex's perspective. I love Alex Trebek, and I loved hearing that this book was coming out when I was watching Jeopardy one night, and I'm like, ooh, I have to get that right away. I requested my library get it, so on the first day, I could listen to it on audiobook, and I did, and I loved it. I think I realized that Alex and I are one and the same because he said his favorite drink, it wasn't some fancy, alcoholic drink, it was milk. And I love milk, and I know it's childish, but I loved that. I loved finding that out. Then I finished up Once Upon a Dream by Liz Braswell. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, and I read this physically. This is part of the Disney Twisted Tales series. This is the second one that I read. This is based on Sleeping Beauty and asks the question, what would happen if Sleeping Beauty never woke up? If she got kissed by the prince, but she ended up never waking up? And I didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed the first one that I read, which was based on Aladdin, maybe because I'm more familiar with the story of Aladdin. But this one just goes through the minds and the dreams of Sleeping Beauty because, again, she's asleep. She hasn't woken up. And so I did really enjoy that. It was a different take on what I was expecting from this. And while there were some points that I didn't really like, I ended up enjoying the story for completely different reasons than what I originally thought I was going to like. So it was still a good read, and I love these darker, edgier, grittier side of Disney stories. Then on audio, I finished The Great Influenza by John M. Barry. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is the story of the 1918 Spanish flu, or the pandemic that happened nearly 100 years ago. And I was really curious to get this. It was on a long waiting list actually for audiobook, and I was just really curious to see how they responded to the pandemic back in 1918, when we don't have the technology we have, we don't have the medicine that we have, or anything like that. And it's really similar. It parallels a lot of what we're going on now, what's happening now. And so it was really fascinating. But to kind of combat that vibe that was giving off, I then read My Hero Academia Volume 1. This is by, and I know I'm going to say this wrong, Kohei Horikoshi. This is the story of young Izuku who lives in a world full of quirks, which are superpowers, and his life is just changed when he meets his favorite hero of all time, All Might. This was my first time reading a manga, so it was kind of confusing on how to read this at first. I knew you had to read essentially backwards of what I'm used to reading here in America, but trying to figure out, especially when it came to the graphics of, even though I read right to left, do I still read like left to right, like on the page? And they do give you a little guide in here because, they know that we don't know how to read this. And so that was really nice, and that was really helpful as well. This was so adorable. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I've already seen the anime that goes with it, some of the episodes of it from my friend who's a really big fan of this as well, and it was so cute. I loved it. My last audiobook of the summer months in August was Dear Girls by Ali Wong. and it was also narrated by her as well. And I don't know much about Ali Long. I really liked her movie, Always Be My Maybe on Netflix. I thought that was really good. Her comedy isn't something that is really my style. From her book, it seems like it was very vulgar, and that's just not kind of my thing. I'm more of like self-deprecating, like John Mulaney. He just kind of makes fun of himself the entire time. And so that's kind of more my style of humor, not really like the vulgar side of it, which is fine if people want to do that. It's just not my style, but I did really enjoy listening to her story as well, especially as a minority in the entertainment industry and what that meant for her growing up and growing big as a female minority comic. And finally, at the very end, literally the last day of August, I was able to finish Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and this definitely deserved the hype that I heard about it. This definitely was something that was interesting to me. I didn't expect there to be like a plot twist in there, but it is written in interview format, and so I didn't really know what to expect from that. And so it felt like I was watching a Netflix like docuseries or something like that, so I was able to picture it in my mind, and I really liked that. And it was very enjoyable. It was something that I really enjoyed. It wasn't a 5-star read for me, but you will find out why in a later future review video. So that is all of the books I read in the summer months of June, July, and August. Again, not the best kind of reading season that I've had, but I'm excited for fall to start. I'm ready to just dive into more books. It's going to start getting cooler outside, and so I just love the spooky fall atmosphere of everything. And so I'm just excited to keep on reading for the rest of the year. Let me know what you guys read during these months down in the comments below. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, keep on gabbing.